This is Stephen Kwache, and you're welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into the world of finance to break down two fundamental concepts that you would need to understand if you desire to be rich. This is Financial Education 101: Asset versus Liability. So now, the question is, what is an asset? Because you clearly must be able to differentiate between what an asset is and what a liability is also. This is one fundamental issue that those who are not financially literate or educated sometimes are not able to differentiate. You may be having a liability, but nevertheless, you classify it as an asset. And in the other sense, you may be having something that you classify as a liability, but in actual sense, it is more of an asset for you. Now, fundamentally, an asset is anything that you have that puts money into your pocket. And a liability is anything that you have or you possess that takes money out of your pocket. This is the foundation and the basis of everything that you need to know. Because as we keep on living and going and engaging ourselves in our day-to-day activity, we accumulate stuff from time to time. Some of the stuff that we accumulate over time begins to bring income to us, puts money into our pocket, some on daily basis, some on weekly basis, some on monthly basis. So things that you have in possession that constantly brings money into your pocket, you classify them as assets. And at the same time, you'll be having things that you possess that from time to time requires you to take money from your pocket. Such things, you classify them as liabilities. Now, one thing may be an asset to one person, and at the same time, that same thing will be a liability to another person. Okay? So this is what I'm saying. The things that we are in possession of by themselves do not determine whether they are an asset or a liability. No. Having a car, having a house, having a land, having cash, whatever, by themselves is not what determines whether it is an asset or a liability. It is all based on how they are used. For instance, if I have a car, and that car, I'm using it for my private use, whereby I use it for my daily activities, from moving from point A to point B. Such a vehicle will be classified as a liability. Why? Because this vehicle does not put money into my pocket. From time to time, I would have to do maintenance. I would have to do maintenance. I have to buy fuel into it. I have to, pay for roadworthy insurance and stuff. So from time to time, you realize that I'll have to be taking money from my pocket in order to maintain and ensure that that vehicle is fit for purpose. But that same vehicle, depending on how I choose to use it, as in I decide to use it for a transport business, in other sense, Uber. Such a vehicle, unlike previously, will now begin to generate income into my pocket. How? Because on daily basis, I'll be generating revenue from that vehicle. So the same vehicle, one I'm using it for my personal rounds, the other one I'm using it for what? A transport business. The first scenario where I'm using it for my personal round, it is more of a liability because it is taking money from my pocket. And in the other sense, using it from a transport business is now an asset to me. Why? Because from time to time, it brings money into my pocket. Okay, so the direction of your cash flow, the direction of the cash, the movement of cash is what determines whether something that you possess is an asset or a liability. Okay, so what am I just trying to communicate? I'm saying that whatever you have in your possession could be classified as an asset or a liability depending on how you use it. Okay, some of you have buildings that are more of liabilities to you, but you classify them as an asset. If you have a building that is there that you are not receiving income from it, but rather from time to time you have to do maintenance, you have to be cutting grass, you have to be doing painting, you have to be doing repairs, you have to be doing payment of property tax and stuff, such a property, you can classify that property as a liability. Okay, but the same property, if it's available, that you are renting it out, especially if you have built and you are not within the country. Okay, you have built, you are not within the country, and then that property is just vacant, and from time to time you have to resend money for maintenance and whatever. Now it is not an asset, it has become a liability to you. In other way, you can flip it around and turn it into an asset, whereby it becomes an income generating possession. Okay, in other sense, it begins to generate revenue on monthly basis. So now I need you to understand this fundamental concept, because you need to come to terms with this. This is fundamental. That is for your financial education 101. You need to be able to differentiate between the assets that you have and the liabilities that you possess. Your inability to differentiate them will make your journey to prosperity very, very difficult. So don't look more in terms of whether it is a house, a land, a property, or whatever it is, but rather look at the position and the place that they play in your life, whether they are putting and bringing money to you or whether they are taking money away from you. Okay, it is that you are able to use to identify whether this thing that you possess is more of an asset or a liability. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the fact that the rich always invest in assets. Always invest in asset. The poor, the financially uneducated, always invest in liability which they believe to be an asset. Okay, that is the mistake of those who are unable to make it and break free financially. Why? Because they keep on investing in stuff that to them it is an asset. Okay, but to the financially educated, it is rather a liability. As Africans and as Ghanaians, one of the biggest challenges that we have is the fact that we do not really sit down to really understand what an asset and what's a liability. And I believe this is one of the main reasons why we struggle as Africans and as Ghanaians. And that's the purpose for which this channel was established, in terms of creating financial literacy. Okay, we learn a lot of things in our school system, our educational system, but to learn about money is not something that we are taught. The poor accumulate stuff that they believe sincerely to be asset, and that is a big challenge. And that is why I told you that poverty is always in the mind. It's in the mind. And if you have realized, I spend considerable time of my videos, trying to help people to renew their mind. Okay, the poor man's poverty is not with money. It has to do with the mind. You will give a poor man money, and that money rather will be used to purchase more liability. Okay, the wealthy, financially educated, and rich people do not use money to buy liabilities. Poor people will rather take money and buy liabilities, which to them is more of an asset. We have Ghanaians only sika kakra biano opese okoto car, okoto of it. When with some small accumulation of money, now he wants to change the vehicle to buy an expensive 4x4. Okay, want to buy the best of houses and all this sort of stuff, forgetting that these are not things that will be generating an income for such a person. Okay, but the literate will rather be thinking about how do I invest this money into things that will be putting money into my pocket. So the fact that you have a house does not make it into, or does not turn it into, an asset. Okay, it is what you use that property that you have, being it a car, a house, a land, or whatever, that determines whether it is truly an asset or a liability. Whatever you are possessing by itself intrinsically doesn't make it into an asset or a liability, but rather what you use it for, that will determine the ultimate classification of such an. I would encourage you to subscribe to this channel. This is a channel that is designed for your financial education, for the establishment of businesses, and for self-improvement.